Greetings YouTube, Captain Machine here, back for another video, and today we're talking about the third book in the SLA Industries line, which is just simply titled Mort, or as it says on the cover, Mort's Source Book. This is one of the SLA Industries books that came out during the Wizards of the Coast tenure of the line, and I believe it's the last one they ever did, and this was the last book for a long time that came out for this setting. Is it any good? Well, we're going to talk about that. It's not as good as Karma. That's going to be the first downside to this. Karma was, as I said before, very fluff orientated, very much a player driven thing. There was not a lot of GM secrets to it, and to a certain extent this book does carry on from that. However, I feel that its focus is a bit lackluster and there are some points where the ball gets dropped. However, it's not a completely bad book, it's actually quite a good read still. So even with those negative comments in mind, and bear in mind I'm comparing it to one of the best books in the range up until this point, please don't come across as thinking I don't like this book. I really do. It's just that it's not as good as it could have been. There's so much potential there as a source book which is just missed. As the book says, Mort is the name of not only the planet that the game is primarily based on, but also the name of the city. Kind of like New York, you know, it's a state and a city at the same time. And right off the bat, almost on the very first page, it makes its first failure. It gives you a map of the city. It's kind of overlaid with some text and some images, but it does give you a map of the city. And then almost on the next page after that, it gives you a map of the northern hemisphere of Mort. So you can see where the poles are, where Many is, which is where the academy where operatives get trained, and a couple of other landmarks, interesting features are in relation to the city. So it gives you a little bit of an idea what the topography of the place is. Bear in mind it's flat. Any sort of mountain ranges or anything like that have long since been torn down to, make tiles for paving people's bathrooms, because after all, money don't earn any money, but tiling does. That's kind of how the universe of progress works. So outside of civilization, it's just a barren, dusty wasteland where there's nothing alive at all. So while you get a topography, it's debatable whether or not it's useful. However, the big failure of both of these maps is it doesn't give a scale at all. It's been very confusing over the years, and it's never really been satisfactory answer, because if you really dig deep down into the source books, you actually find contradictory answers to the questions, which is how big is Mort City, how big is Cannibal Sector 1, how big is Central, how big is Downtown, and it only adds more to the confusion. I guess the idea is that the GM's supposed to fill in the blanks, but a lot of GMs don't feel comfortable doing that. They want to be able to revert back to canon and say, okay, in this universe the standard answer is X. I mean, it's more beneficial for a game system to give you the answer and then give you the option of changing it, other than not giving you an answer at all and telling you to make it up yourself. Much in the same way World of Darkness works, in the fact that you get given a lot of answers to a lot of questions with regards to the background, the history, and how the world works, but you get told right off the bat, if you don't like this, you can change it. And doing it the other way around, whereas if this is the mystery, make it up, is harder to do as a GM. I mean, after all, why you buy the books. You buy the books to answer the questions, to expand upon your knowledge, to get more ideas. And I'm rambling now, and I'm not even past the first point. Looking through the book, you've got quite a lot of stuff in here. You've got, just quickly work through this for you. You've got a rough breakdown of what the different sectors are like. Little amusing tidbits here and there about different parts of it, how transport within the city works, which is very, very useful. Then there's a huge chapter, absolutely huge chapter about the pit. Now, for those of you who've never played SLA Industries before, read any fiction for it, the pit is kind of a, kind of nonsensical, really. Basically, the pit is the world's largest nightclub. It's purely for operatives. You cannot get into the pit unless you are a SLA Industries operative, and it's quite a magnificent place. It gives you an idea of the breathtaking scale of the architecture and things that the corporation is willing to do, not only to make money, but reward people that work for it. And I think it spends too long on this. I mean, this would have made for a nice little softback book maybe, but putting it in here is, in my opinion, a wasted page count, because you're rarely going to use this. It's a good meeting place for meeting your contacts and such and so forth, but it doesn't deserve to be fleshed out to the degree it has been in this book. I mean, you'll see later on when I'm talking about other things, what other things went in here which could have been expanded upon. You've also got a lot of information about the Shivers. This is incredibly helpful. The Shivers are basically the police of Mort City. Granted, the operatives do uphold the law, but they're kind of like private contractors compared to the actual police that do the day-to-day policing of Mort City, which are the Shivers. Gives you a good idea of their back history, where the name comes from, what their structure is, what their operating procedures are. It gives you a very, very good idea of how Shivers should interact with operatives. That's not to say that's how they do interact with them, and there are several examples given where they don't do that. Obviously, you can give your players a curveball right off the bat by having Shivers act out of character, and that only adds to the mystery and the air of them. But you get in here what they're supposed to do, what their protocols are. Obviously, you can twist and turn that however you want. And the Shivers are really interesting because the Shivers started off as kind of a joke, and they still are kind of a joke within the setting. They wear power armour, they wear some of the most expensive power armour you can buy. They're organised into teams of 10, up to 10, sorry, which is way more than operatives run around in. They should potentially be very scary and very deadly, and then they get given BB guns, or the equivalent of BB guns, to suppress crowds, which means that anything big and nasty that comes along, they can't deal with. So it's kind of interesting, although it does give you an idea about the different branches of Shiver, like the Fire Shivers, the Enforcer Shivers, which are really dangerous people. They're the people that get sent to track down operatives if they go rogue, so they are armed to the teeth. And you've also got Dispersal Shivers, who are basically riot police, and as anyone has seen in the riots lately, riot police, even on a good day, are really nasty people because they have to be. That's kind of what their role is. Dispersal Shivers in the Mort City universe are insane to the point of utterly violent. You get some really interesting idea about the vehicles they use, the equipment they have, and then you get a lovely, lovely set of stories about how downtown works. Not only in terms of how gangs and such and so forth operate, but also how props, which are basically masked mercenaries, work. Also gives you an idea about the depth of more downtown, because downtown is not only just what on the surface, but it's several levels below. Although once again, it doesn't give you a really good idea how deep downtown actually goes. But it gives you an idea of this breakdown in society the further down you get. So it's kind of interesting to read about that. So it does give you an answer to that one, but it doesn't give you a definitive answer. So it gives you room to wiggle with. Bear with me a moment, the camera's about to die. Sorry about that, the back wasn't fully charged, that's my own fault. Where was I? Oh yes, downtown is very subterranean, kind of like how Undercity works in the Judge Dredd universe, but much more dense. I would probably akin it more to the Underhive in Necromunda than anything else, in the fact that the further down you go, the more decrepit, the more unlivable it gets, but the more strange and unusual stuff that you tend to find down there. So I do like that aspect of it because it gives me an idea of what to do with it. Although it does answer a lot, it does raise a lot more questions than it answers. Stuff like, well, if downtown is subterranean and there are literally housing estates like 3 or 4 stories down, in complete darkness all the time, obviously lit by fluorescent lights and all the rest of it, and then does that go underneath Central? Does that go underneath Uptown? How far out past the city boundaries does it stretch? Does it stretch underneath Cannibal Sector? And if so, is it normal down there, or is it weird and effed up? And if it is effed up, I mean, is there a boundary? You know, the wall that surrounds Cannibal Sector, that kind of keeps things out on the top level. I mean, that's the most visible way of keeping out the nasties in Cannibal Sector, but does that wall descend down at several levels? So I suppose as a GM you could answer that question yourself, but once again, it's stuff that is more to think about in terms of how the campaign works. I suppose you could leave it, you don't have to answer it straight away, but eventually you're going to come across a scenario where a player's going to ask you flat out, especially if they know the background, you know, can I do this, can we go here, is this a viable option? And at that point you're on your own. And that's the kind of bit I resent. That's why I don't like having all the answers. I don't mind filling in the gaps, I really don't, but when the gaps are so huge you could drive a campaign through it, it gets a bit You also get the first ever mention of scavs in here as well. Now scavs, scavs are basically an unknown group. They don't appear to be soft company operatives, or at least they don't act like them anyway. Their army is very piecemeal. It doesn't appear to be manufactured by any one particular group. It's more like they've taken various bits of gear they've found and cobbled it all together. There's not a lot of information given about them, and generally speaking it would appear at the time of writing that SLA Industries as a whole doesn't really consider them to be a massive threat, although they are interested to find out what's going on with them. However, the props, which are basically hired guns, they're not operatives of any corporation, they're just literally hired guns that populate downtown and sell their services, are being used by the corporation, unknownly to them mind you, to keep the scavs under control. Now in the future we're going to learn more about the scavs, we're going to get a better idea what their origins are and what their agendas are, but for the time being it's just a little subtle reference you can pop in there. Now at the time of publishing, scavs are kind of an interesting idea. I don't mind these because obviously you could make them anything you want them to be. But I get the overall impression they're supposed to be technologically advanced cannibals. That's how they're portrayed, or at least that's the information we're given so far. They're not made out to be as scary as they will become in the future. And finally, as a little tidbit, at the back of the original SLA Industries core rulebook, there was a collection of BPNs, which are basically what these little blue cards you would get from SLA Industries, which tell you what your job are and what you have to do. Now, they don't go into a lot of detail, they never did. In fact, they were literally just the card and that were it, and you had to make the adventure up as you went along. And what they've done is they've fleshed that out by giving you a page description of an adventure which matches that description. So that is insanely helpful. So if you're a new GM, that is very, very helpful, because you can take a BPN which has already been published by the company, and then you can take the idea, the one-page idea which goes with that, and expand upon it. So that is a really good point. So all in all, out of 5, I would give this a solid 3 out of 5. It does fall down quite a lot in the fact that it gives me a lot of holes, a lot of gaps. It doesn't answer a lot of the questions I wanted with regards to how Mort City as a city actually worked, what its topography was. I don't get an accurate map, which I really wanted. I don't get a scale, which I think is incredibly important. I mean, after all, if I'm chasing someone that's moving from sector to sector, I want to know how long it's going to take them to get there. You know, that's just one example. I don't get told, you know, you don't know what's going on in various different aspects of the city. And yes, you are supposed to feel it as a GM. It is open to interpretation, and maybe that's a strength of the line as far as some people are concerned. I don't consider it that big of a strength. Comparing this to, shall we say, the New World of Darkness, which doesn't have a meta plot, so anything outside of like Chicago or any of the other published cities is basically your own work. It isn't really like that, because there's plenty of material out there about Mort City. It's just that you're expected to fill in the gaps, and that's where I think the book falls down. That's where it falls short. Plus it does waste a chapter, in my honest opinion, on the pit. A couple of pages would have been a far more suitable use for it. I don't think that the information included within it is worth the page count. However, having said all the negative things so far, the positives balance them out. You get plenty of information about the shivers. Shivers are an insanely important part of how the game works and what kind of backup you can expect, because after all, you are private contractors. You're not supposed to take on everything alone. You can call for backup if you need it, and SLA Industries will provide that to you, provided they can. So you need to know what's going to come around the corner, what the cavalry are, who you can report to in the case of, like, say, a murder investigation or something like that, or if you apprehend someone, how you turn them over. I mean, stuff like this is so important, and it fleshes out beautifully. It also gives me a rough idea of how downtown operates. It doesn't answer all the questions, which I know is what I originally said about things, but it does give me an idea of how effed up it actually can get down there. And it does answer one. It does bring up one point, which is how deep does it go? The answer is very deep, because it isn't really, up until this point, isn't really clear. There is even a subterranean sector beyond, say, shall we say, a sewer level within Mort City. And to top it all off, you get those fleshed out BPNs at the back of the book, which gives you a much better idea of how the game is supposed to be played and what adventures actually are supposed to be like at the end of the day. So all in all, well, we'll only reviewed 2 source books so far, and this is sadly the second best one. Karma beats this book hands down. Now, is the next book going to be any better? We'll find out. But for the time being, this is Captain Machine with Mort City. Solid 3 out of 5. If you are interested in the line, you want to know more information about the city, pick it up. You may like the idea that you have to fill in the gaps. You may be one of those gems that really prefers to do that. If you're not, it might not be the book for you. Okay guys, thank you for your time. Goodbye.